What else does a man need to have happen in his life before he understands that the prevention of sin's birth is the acceptance of order? Yes, order is an act of prevention and meant to protect the children of God and keep them from behaving like beasts. For we are not beasts, but men, of which the greatest understand the mysteries that even challenge that stance. Our acceptance of order, despite our inherent sinful nature, prevents the absence of that which we need and the presence of that which we do not need, but want, despite its poisonous attributes. What matters more to a man? His children or a brief sexual encounter, one that might lead to an extremely long and drawn-out process of death? What should matter more to a man? His confessions of sins or his standing in the public eye? I ask you to consider the importance of understanding that God is able to see your every move before you consider darkness and its power to cover your wickedness. After all, we know that the unseen enemies of humanity do not intend to keep your evil hidden. On the contrary, their very presence speaks to their unified desire to expose your spirit as being more like their own and less like the God that created it. How could a person that understands the spiritual realms and how these energies work ever convince himself or herself that these wicked, displaced, and damned terrestrial beings plan to do what is in your best interest before they do what they have always done? And what have they always done? They have always made war with God and all that He loves. So it takes a great deal of deception and the suspension of logic for this to be accomplished. Because if considered, it is simply illogical to believe that the same God that blessed you when you asked Him to, protected you when you asked Him to, and allowed your sins to be forgiven when you asked Him to, would somehow become ignorant, blind, deaf, dumb, and powerless to deal with you righteously should you decide to turn your back to all that has been to embrace that which you desire to become, despite how evil it might be. You can have that, but only in the place of something else that will be removed. So take inventory of your life and ask yourself what you are willing to exchange for that wicked thing that you desire to have. Is your wife expendable? How about your children or your parents? Is your happiness expendable or your health? What about your name, your good name, or your self-respect? Are either of these expendable? Even if you answered yes, is your life expendable? Because if you answer yes to that, your answer speaks to a greater issue. And until that issue is dealt with, you will always allow what does not love you to speak for you, to decide for you, to live for you. But understand that it will never die for you. Why? Because you are not worth its own life. It will not wear your judgment, nor will it ever accept your pain as valid or your sorrow as real. Your enemy will never validate your existence, and yet you are willing to exchange that which loves you for that which does not. You can have, but I have to take. How powerful is this concept? Think about your life and what is no longer a part of it as a result of your embracing something that destroyed a relationship or an opportunity or anything else that you look back on now and recognize it was something that you actually needed, even if you didn't respect that truth at that time. I submit to you that this issue of inventory is very real, as we are all born with predetermined destinies, and the fulfillment of these destinies are dependent upon the presence of what is needed to fulfill them, in the absence of that which will work to prevent their fulfillment. You can have, but I have to take. Think about this today and meditate on the implications of such an absolute. Think about your diet And then say to yourself, I can have this, but what will be taken from me? If your diet is such that you eat what is actually beneficial to your space, and it adds to and makes you stronger in your space, then you are doing as you have been created to do. But if your diet is one that will eventually lead to sickness within your body, the end of the phrase, you can have, should be, but I have to take your help. You can have that specific meal, but I have to take your help. You can have that snack, but I have to take your help. You can have, but I have to take. If you struggle with pride and you are at war with someone for whatever reason, in the phrase you can have, but I have to take that relationship completely from your life. If you struggle with addiction, in the phrase you can have, but I have to take your children. You can have, but I have to take your wife. You can have, but I have to take your dignity. You can have, but I have to take your life. Now I can go on and on, as the running theme here has been made clear and seems to be absolute. You will not go through this life collecting whatever you want, whenever you want, as your space does not operate under such laws. Your space can only hold so much inventory, and when at capacity, something will be removed. Now, that something will be based on what you decide, even if you try to lie to yourself and blame God for your misfortune. In the end, when all is said and done, you have free will, and you have the right to place the items within your life in order of importance as you believe them to be. Just know that when your space is in fact filled to capacity, you will not be able to scramble and rearrange anything unless God allows it. In David's case, it was not allowed. He prayed for the child that he had with Bathsheba, and yet the child still died. I'm sure David was praying continuously, as before he met Bathsheba. Many of his prayers, he prayed all the time, and many of his prayers were answered. But in regards to the sin that he committed with Bathsheba, he had to deal with each and every item that he made part of his spatial inventory without exception, as will most of us. A wise man will not wait until calamity comes upon him to pray and take inventory of his space. Whereas a fool will call on God in the midst of judgment and fill his space with even more wickedness when he feels that God isn't going to answer his prayers. You can have, but I have to take.